In the previous video, I discussed how digital humanities can be helpful to scholars studying fanfiction, using a case study of the fandom for the fan-favorite TV show Supernatural. In this video, my colleague Prakhar and I will show you how we use textual data from natural language processing to create a map of story settings. Think about your favorite books, movies, TV shows. They've probably got a prominent, recognizable setting. In fanfiction, this setting might be the same as it is in the text fans are writing fanfiction for, but to what extent do fans relocate stories to be in other places? What about something like story length? Are longer stories more likely to be solidly associated with a location?
We aim to find an accessible way to analyze the data. So we use Gemini, which is Google's open source Gen AI API, instead of any other paid version. Using natural language processing on a corpus of 4,000 fanfiction texts, each story was broken down into 6 files containing data on parts of speech, characters, and actions. I passed these files, specifically POS tags and supersense files, to identify references to location. Using Gemini, I asked the AI to predict the state each story is set in and provide a confidence score. After several iterations, I refined the prompt for Gemini API and included example JSON output for better parsing. The prompt has 4 elements, namely context, information, example, and task. Out of 4,000 stories, the AI predicted states for about 2,000. Of these, 1,400 had a confidence score above 80%, indicating reliable predictions. To address AI hallucination, we implemented sanity check by asking the AI to provide logical reasoning and confidence score for its inferences. The best approach involves separate AI agents for inference, confidence scoring, and logical validation while being mindful of the environmental impact of running large language model queries. We visualize the output data using Tableau, which is a business intelligence and data visualization tool with various filters on words and date of publishing, etc.
Looking at this geographic data, a couple of trends were revealed by our large-scale analysis that I wouldn't have been able to see myself just reading a few stories. What does this data tell me as a humanities scholar? When I think about participatory culture, I think about how people adapt something like a TV series to suit their own purposes. In the fan studies field, we call this poaching. Fans take what they like from a text, leave behind what they don't, and recombine elements to create something new. So this data shows me that fans are often poaching the setting of Supernatural. Though the series is itinerant by nature, Kansas is a frequent backdrop and later becomes a kind of home base for the characters, and we can see that in the abundance of stories. This also accounts for the prevalence of stories set in South Dakota, where a major character of the show lived in the early seasons. But look at all these other states fans have chosen to set their story in. They have set them in states that the show never set an episode in, like New Hampshire, South Carolina, Hawaii, Alabama, and others. Many of the other states only had one-off or very few episodes take place in them. All of this suggests to me that when fans choose to set their stories in a recognizable geographical setting, they are often writing new adventures for their characters, sending them places they didn't go before. This is emblematic of fanfiction textual practice, poaching the fictional characters but leaving behind the setting of the show to create a new work. Since only about a fifth of the total stories are located in Kansas, this gives me some sense of the frequency with which fans are likely to relocate stories. It's higher than I would have thought. When we look to the metadata, some nuances added to our analysis. We can see that this poaching pattern is fairly consistent over time when we take into account when the stories were published. But the story length does change things. The longer a story is, the less likely that it is taking place with the backdrop of canonical Kansas. We see the share of stories taking place in Kansas shrink as story length grows. We might conclude that when fans are crafting a longer story, they aren't as likely to use the ready-made settings given to them. They're crafting something new for the characters, likely because they have the space to do so in a longer work. A shorter story can more easily rely on the setting fans already know, allowing for a compact narrative that need not linger on setting. Fellow fans will already be on the same page. In line with this, going back to the data itself even before we visualized it, what's most interesting to me is that only roughly 2,000 stories, or about half of my corpus, were even specifically located in a geographic place. Here we can see an affordance of the fanfiction genre. Because the characters are ready-made for writers, stories can be short, sweet, and in that concision perhaps not have any recognizable setting at all. It's hard to imagine a novel or movie not having some sense of setting, but fanfiction can rely on the shared knowledge a reader will bring with them to a text. Even with half of our data giving us a null result for location, this null result still tells us something interesting about how fans write and read these stories. If I continue to this digital humanities project, my next steps might be to compare this to other fandoms. Are supernatural fans doing something unique, or is this spread of poaching and relocation characteristic of other kinds of transformative writing? We could also use this methodology and code on a larger corpus of more traditional literary novels. Are novels more or less likely to be definitively tied to a location than fanfiction stories? This case study has hopefully shown one way that digital humanities tools can assist the study of literature as we have traditionally practiced it, and open up new avenues of inquiry. Given the theory of participatory culture, described qualitatively, I can then quantitatively see the extent to which fans poach locations from a text, and then furthermore interpret the reasons why they might be doing so. Though this data set represents just one popular slice of one popular fandom, it tells us something about the theoretical model fan study scholars have developed. Our example of large corpus analysis using NLP is just one way of doing digital humanities. New methodologies and ways of seeing humanistic data are being developed. Network analysis, digital archival work, word frequency, sentiment analysis, and topic modeling are all being employed and refined as scholars use computational methods to understand literature at a different scale.